Welcome, listeners, to www.IronRadio.org, the website and podcast for all things strength sports and sports nutrition. With your hosts, Lonnie Lowery.
Remember, Phil is like a gnarled old oak tree held together with scar tissue and bone spurs.
Rob Fortney.
And I'm telling you, the pain that I would suffer was beyond excruciating.
And Phil Stevens.
Do it, Rob. You'll kill all those nerves.
Thanks for listening. Welcome, IronRadio.org listeners. This is Lonnie Lowery. I am an exercise physiology and nutrition professor, and I am a competitive bodybuilder.
Hello, folks. Robert Fortress Fortney here, former editor at Muscle Mag International, former competitive bodybuilder, and current powerlifter.
And this is Phil Stevens. I'm a strength athlete in powerlifting at Highland Games. I'm the founder of liftforhope.org and co-founder of strengthguild.com.
All right, folks. Today we have a very special guest. He was on the show once before, and he's definitely Iron Radio certified. He gets the highest marks here with us, Mr. Bill Pearl.
How are
Hi,
you
Bill.
guys doing? I'm in with some heavy competition this afternoon. That's obvious with you guys.
No.
That's fantastic.
We'll always be under your umbrella of might.
That's right.
We appreciate that. Thank you. All of us do.
Those introductions, rather, I've had a couple of people say, oh, you guys always say, who you are, what you're about, but I think we start that way because there's so many poor quality podcasts out there. We just don't want people to think that we're just, excited 19-year-olds or something.
Right.
So you try to have a little bit of credibility.
Now,
I guess.
before we
on top of that, though, with credentials such as you have, it's silly not to let people know who they're listening to. All kidding aside, I think it's very important that you do this.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Now, before we get going though with Bill, I think we have a couple news pieces that we should get out of the way. Correct?
Well, I have one here just quickly. Last week I was talking about soda pop and cola and drinks like that and Pepsi and whatnot, if you remember. And when I was doing that, I came across this other one. I thought I would just share it with listeners. This is from Science News. From Science Daily, which is a really good website. I suggest people go check it out. It's kind of broad spectrum science news, but this is from February 18th. It says, among the many differences between girls and boys, we can now add the effects of caffeine, both physiological, behavioral, and subjective, to the list. So this is sort of interesting. Our findings from this study and from a previous study suggest that boys and girls respond differently to caffeine. We're hoping that the findings from our studies on caffeine will help us determine why males and females differ in susceptibility to things like drug abuse or addiction, or why they respond differently to treatment. This particular study here is a double-blind, placebo-controlled study. It was dose-response kind of study, escalating doses to caffeine here. It was conducted by Jennifer Temple and colleagues, who's a neurobiologist and assistant professor of exercise and nutrition science at University of Buffalo. So someone that's teaching in a department similar to what I do. The study involved 26 boys and 26 girls between the ages of 12 and 17. To take part in the research, the teenagers were required to have previous experience with caffeine, but no adverse reactions, etc. And down here at the bottom here, let's see. After researchers took baseline heart rate and blood pressure, the participants drank a beverage containing 50, then 100, then 200 milligrams of caffeine, or one with no caffeine. And this just basically explains that boys respond differently from girls. It's the first study to demonstrate gender differences in the response to caffeine. It's basically, here's what it just says. Boys get a greater rush and more energy from caffeine than do girls. Boys also report that they felt caffeine had a more positive effect on their athletic performance, whereas girls did not report this. So I'm not going to go on with tons of news today, but since we were talking about cola and caffeine and those sorts of things, I just thought I would add that to the list. But we have local news too, right? Because
yeah, but I want to just add one thing there. Of course, I'm coming from Canada. You guys are all from the States. I don't know if it's the same down there, but in the last several weeks, there's been a lot of television news and so forth about the effects of all these, caffeine energy drinks that are being sold in variety stores and such. And of course, they're talking about the sugar content and the caffeine content and how it's becoming much more kind of pertinent for people to kind of look at the effects of that on young people, because of course the majority of those drinks are bought and drank by young people. So,
right.
So yeah, I think,
and of course they're containing amino acids and a bunch of herbs and other things. In fact, you know what? Between the specialty coffees, I mean, coffee and tea are already the most drank beverages in the world, but between specialty coffees and now the specialty energy drinks, one of my classes last fall, the textbook was actually saying, we were teaching this, all the health professors were, that college students nowadays actually sleep 90 minutes less on average than a generation ago. And I can see the links there. I mean, coffee and all these extra special kinds of coffees and these energy drinks and everything. It's not like people are having a cup of black coffee, Rob, like you or I would before we went and squatted or something. They've always got one in their hands, and I'm not surprised people sleep less. They probably can't sleep.
Yeah.
So,
and we have one more piece of news. I think it's going to become courtesy of Phil. I think there might be some comedy attached to this, but anyway, let's hear it, Phil.
I got lunk alarmed on Monday. I came into a gym here, and I took time. I know all the gyms because I grew up here. Recently, I moved. I moved last week, got here, and this was going to be my first time going to a gym. So this is a non-commercial gym, and it was like the hardcore-ish gym of the town. And so I went in and I paid my day fee and began to lift. I successfully made it through, 4 warm-up reps of various loads before I got approached and said, you can no longer lift here because that's too much noise.
Were you deadlifting?
Yeah, I made it to my 4th warm-up, and I got to 495, and just the act of setting the bar down, they would not allow that in the gym.
So you weren't yelling or anything. This is just clanging
just
plates.
The bar hitting the floor. Yeah, they were like, either you can stop that, or you can learn how to set it down with no noise.
Just so Bill knows, Phil is an otherworldly deadlifter, and he's approaching 800 pounds. So
that is fantastic.
Yeah. So
fantastic.
Yeah. Phil doesn't gently set down 800 pounds.
Well, that's
I don't think anybody sets down 800 pounds gently, period.
Yeah, that's what I tried to explain to them, was, I was at 500. I was like, I am setting it down gently. It's not like I'm throwing it down. It's just it makes noise out of the nature of it being 500 pounds.
Did you just look at them and say, but I'm Phil?
Yeah, I know. It was interesting. So,
but that's a sad commentary, though, because I don't know if this is true, and maybe one of our listeners could email me and tell me if this is in fact true, but I've even heard that Venice Golds lately has instituted a no deadlift policy. I don't know if that's true or not, but if it is, that's horrible.
That's
rational
silly
prejudice
to do
against
something
the
such
deadlift.
as this, especially at Gold's Gym, when
exactly.
if you look at the logo and everything else is hardcore to the bitter end, and if there's not an exercise out there that isn't more standard than a deadlift or a squat, that's what we do all day long from beginning to end. So it's silly to do that. That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Anyway, let's. All right, Phil. Well, are they going to let you back there, or?
I don't know. No. All it's going to do is rush me to. I was looking for somewhere to go for a week or two while I took the time to set up my equipment in my garage.
Right.
And it's just going to force me to do that quicker. So.
Yeah, they just can't handle the might of the Philmeister.
I guess, yeah.
Fantastic.
Well, it does tie in with the topic of the day about how people perceive us. Obviously those gym managers weren't really, what's the word I'm looking for? Compassionate toward Phil's goals.
Yeah.
So,
Phil, you could always just tell the manager that you know personally Bill Pearl.
Yeah, there you go.
And
that might help.
I hate to do, but that won't buy you a cup of the coffee you're talking about. So you got to be very careful.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about it too was, it was me and my wife there, and so everybody's staring at me while I did it, and then I stopped lifting. She kept squatting, so everybody started staring at her, and then we just had the whole gym approaching us. Wow, you guys are awesome! I can't believe my wife's over there squatting 200 pounds, and they're just amazed. The clientele is amazed, and the owner's like, "You can't do that." That's just.
Jeez, a little bit of inspiration, and they snuff it out immediately.
Exactly. So.
Mm-hmm.
wow.
So, Bill, let's get to Bill here, since we've got this living legend here with us. How old are you now, Bill?
I'm 80 years old, you guys.
You know, and I know we always ask that, and you're probably tired of everybody asking you that now. But I think
well, they didn't ask me till I turned 80. That was the problem.
Okay,
So,
well,
yeah.
but you know, far from me asking because I'm just trying to point that that you're an older guy. I'm actually doing it just to highlight just how impressive you are. Because I mean, unless anything's changed from the last time we spoke, I'm assuming you're still getting up at 4:00 in the morning and going to your barn and lifting weights.
Yes, I'm doing just exactly what you guys are doing, and I continue to. I'll do this until they put the lid on the caskets. Yes.
All right.
And this is one of the wonderful things about you is just that you're like, to use a phrase that you used there a few minutes ago, you're hardcore to the bitter end. And
yes.
I mean that is just an absolute wonderful thing that just garners all sorts of respect from us here at Iron Radio.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. That's very nice of you.
This weekend is actually the Arnold Classic. Are you going to it?
No, I am not going back. It's just I have no reason to go back just to go to the show by itself and see the competitive bodybuilders. I don't know any of the guys, and which is rather sad. I had the last Olympia contest that I did not go to as well. Mm-hmm. Larry Scott called me. I'm sure you all know who Larry Scott is.
Oh, yes.
And I asked Larry, I said, did Jay Cutler should have won the contest? And of course, Larry Scott said, yes, Billy should have won the contest. And I said, Larry, let me ask you, do you know the name of any other contestant on the stage that day other than Jay Cutler? His answer was no. So when the sport has gotten to the point where you only know maybe the guy who's going to win the contest, period, and everybody else is just there, why bother with it, period?
Now, is this because, to be fair though, is this because you don't really pay attention anymore or read the muscle periodicals, or is it just that you think that a lot of the characters and color of a lot of the former competitors is now absent from a lot of these people today?
I think the character of the color are gone. How many heroes have we had in the last 30 years in the sport of bodybuilding or powerlifting?
Yeah.
You can name them on one hand.
What do you...
that's, if I can just interject, I was listening to a podcast when Arnold Schwarzenegger was doing an interview. This is from about 2 years ago, and he was saying exactly the same thing. They said, do you think that Jay Cutler or any of these top pros can, move the sport ahead like we saw, in the sort of the fitness boom of the 70s and that kind of thing? And he said, well, it depends on their charisma and on their personalities. He said it's all about personalities. Right. It's not about, just their body weight and things like that. And I think we all agree on this podcast. There does seem to be an element of that missing.
Hey, Bill, you brought Jay Cutler up. I would like to ask you, what do you think of him as a bodybuilder?
As a bodybuilder, I think he's phenomenal. There's no question about it. He's able to stay on top of the sport for a long period of time. But then again, it's the overall impact. I mean, what he is today. But will anybody remember who he is 10 years from today? Unless he does something that's definitely important for the sport, or he gets out and does something other than just show off his body, he, like all these other guys, are going to be forgotten.
Yeah. Do you think they've taken it too far at this point?
They've taken it before. The normal reason for the average person, I'll go back and I ask all three of you, if you had a son or a daughter who had abused himself to the extent that these people do to get the recognition due, would you encourage your son or daughter to do what those kids are doing, or not encourage them?
That's a good question.
No, it is.
Or would you want them in the sport or not out of the sport because of the abuse involved?
Right.
And we're all hardcore, mind you. I would not want my kids or my granddaughters to do this.
Right.
No, that's funny that you say that, Bill, because my son is 15, okay. And although he likes to go to the gym and just, lift some weights, I have never taken him to a bodybuilding contest and things like that. Just, I don't know. When I grew up, I was looking at magazines where, Frank Zane was on the cover. People were on the cover that seemed to be reasonable on some level, for lack of a better word, attainable, maybe, in the distant future, but, still, human. And, and I don't really want my son to be a part of that. So I think that's a great yardstick for judging. I think that's a good question.
And I do want to make the point that I don't think any of us here at Iron Radio are, anti-drugs per se. We're also not championing them, but I think there is a line where, as Bill's saying, the amounts, the abuse, and some of the things that people are using. I mean, it's a personal choice, but again, I think that's a wonderful question that Bill proposes. Would you somebody that you care about, would you want them to aspire to that degree of what they have to do to get to that level? So, yeah. But, Bill, something I was thinking about a few minutes before we got on the phone here with you, I was thinking, because the whole iron culture now has kind of splintered into, as you know, you have your, physique bodybuilding, and you have your strongman, your powerlifting, which has become such a specificity, and of course your Olympic weightlifting. And of course they've all kind of, although they'll always be brother-sister sports, they have become so specific in the people who practice them and dedicate their lives to them. Of course, even strongman, who, when that kind of first began, it was kind of something for like retired bodybuilders and powerlifters and so forth to go do. And now there's people who, train from day one to be, strongmen. Being who you are and the era that you come from, do you think that if you were a young man today, of course with the same, zeal and excitement you have for weight training, what avenue do you think you would take? Do you think you would have stayed as a bodybuilder, or do you think you would have done more powerlifting or strongman, or do you think you would have done maybe 2 or 3 of them?
Well, I did all of them anyhow. I really truly did. I was a powerlifter, and I had a strength of feet that I've been 10 spikes, I've been horseshoes, and I break chains, and I do all the things. Maybe not the amount of weight that you guys have handled, but I do things. I had exhibitions where I was trying to emulate the old-time strongmen, such as Eugene Sandow, and the other groups, and Louis Cyr, those type of things. And I was born in that era, and most bodybuilders back then, the background was weight training from the 3 Olympic lifts. If you look at John Grimmick, you look at all these guys prior to just coming on, they were all weightlifters. They weren't bodybuilders; they were weightlifters.
Right.
So it was an evolution.
Well, that's kind of
evolution.
Yeah, and that's kind of why I'm asking, because, of course, like I say, the area you are from, for our younger listeners who don't know, I mean, bodybuilding kind of came up, as Bill's saying, from kind of a branch that kind of sprung out from weight training and Olympic lifts and so forth. So that's why I'm asking you, because, again, today it's become so specific. Now, of course, you do see, competitive bodybuilders that do powerlifting and powerlifters that do bodybuilding and this type of thing, but certainly to get to the kind of the upper echelons, the elite level of usually any of these sports requires such specificity towards that. And that's why I'm asking you again, like if you were a young man today, do you think that you would have been more attracted to the idea of lifting actually weights in a competitive sense, or actually just doing that as the means to an end to be on stage as a physique artist?
What I would want to do, and what I did do, and I would probably do again, I emulate the heroes that I had to get me where I was, or where I am. Okay. And guys like John Grimmick and people prior to me, those people I idolized, perhaps like people idolize Jay Cutler or whoever it may be, and I wanted to be like those guys, period. And so whatever they did, that's what I wanted to do.
Right.
And I'm sure that you're the same way. I don't doubt that any of the 3 of you that we're talking to, you don't have heroes that you've tried to emulate. That's all there is to it. But you've got to have a hero.
Right.
You need a mentor. And,
sure.
Even though you may have never met your mentor, you still have to have mentors.
Right. No, I fully agree, and I think the difference between guys like you and from your era, and certainly not all. I'm not going to paint with the same brushstroke everybody of today, but a great many of the competitors today is they don't have that background of actually just first and foremost love the idea and actual activity of weight training. And anything that is on top of that, as far as, walking on stage and posing, or that's all kind of just icing on the cake. Whereas a lot of guys today, I think, are kind of come at it from the opposite end of the spectrum. They see the magazines and they see the fitness girls with them and all this kind of thing, and they glamorize that, and they see the weight training as only a means to an end. And I think that's I think that's a real shame, to be honest with you, because
it's not a lifestyle; it's a means. Exactly what you said. It's a lifestyle. It is not a lifestyle. It's a means to an end. And some of the heroes that we're talking about, the 3 or 4 that have been along for the last 25 or 30 years, they've used it as a means to an end. And it was not necessarily bodybuilding. It was a means to an end.
Yeah. Just to change focus here of the interview a little bit, tell us what you've been involved in lately, Bill. With any business ventures, or are you just content right now to, as you just say, while you're hours away training and doing that type of thing, the thing that you love?
No, I just finished some books just recently. I wrote a trilogy on the legends of the Iron Game, and it started back in 4,500 years ago, and I brought it up to the year 2010. It was an 8-year project, and I honestly worked 5 or 6 hours per day on this project to get it done. And it's meeting with very good success, and I've had Muscle Mag International have been very, very kind, helping us with the with the distribution and advertising and so on. Iron Man magazine has gone over backwards, and so I truly have been busy. But I'm trying to promote the sport on a positive way, just exactly like you people are.
Right. Now, what's the name of the book again?
Legends of the Iron Game.
And where can our listeners order that book?
If you'll just look on our webpage, just www.com, Bill Pearl, you'll find it on there. And it's over 1,000 pages and over 900 photographs, and it was literally a labor of love, believe me.
Well, it looks like I'm going to have to order one myself, and I encourage our listeners to go check that out. That sounds wonderful.
Oh, thank you. And it's met with really good success. It's probably of the books that I've written, and I've been very, very successful. I've actually written some books that have sold over 1 million copies, and so I've been very fortunate. But this is the thing I'm the most proud of everything that I've done to this particular point.
If somebody orders one of those books, are you willing to sign it for them?
I'd be glad to sign it because that's the biggest compliment they could pay me. So I'm not doing them a favor; they're doing me a favor.
Okay. Well, again, I encourage our listeners to go and order one of those books and have Bill sign it because there's not much more in the Iron Game that you could want and cherish than something like that. That sounds wonderful.
Well, it comes in a nice slipcover, and it's 3 volumes and 365 pages per volume, and there's 3 volumes into it. So it's a nice thing and something that I think most people have it. They're going to buy it because they love the sport as we love the sport, and it just gives them a better idea of where everybody that we've been talking about, attempting to talk about, has come from.
Right. So how is your training going these days?
I still train 5 or 6 days per week, and I start very early in the morning at 4 o'clock, and I'll train to about 5:30, 5:45, and I do it, and I have people who have been training with me for over 40 years, and people 35 years, and it's just like a bunch of old codgers up there plugging away, but we just don't give up.
Hey, if I can interject here, I actually teach a class. It's an exercise physiology class, and there's an example in there. I told Rob about this a couple of weeks ago of healthy aging and what's possible. And Bill, it's your photograph. There's a picture of you as a very young man, and again as an older man, and how your physique was very similar and looked so awesome even then.
Well, thank you.
So I think that is cool, in that young people, they still get to see, some of the benefits of like you said, the lifestyle. So.
Well, I won't give up. Like I say, that I make the comment that the hour and a half or 2 hours I spend in the barn, it's behind our house every day, is the only 2 hours I'm going to give myself each and every day that I am there. And I've said it 1,000 times. I'll give the world 22 hours, but I will not give it 24.
There you go.
What kind of body weight are you maintaining?
I weighed today 227 pounds. I weigh every day and mark on a scale.
Wow. That's remarkable. Now, when you train with weights, do you more look at it more like an exercise type thing now, or do you actually still have aspirations and goals that you want to meet on specific lifts or anything like that, like reps?
No, I'm past that stage, and I made a comment. I think the last posing exhibition I gave was at the age of 65 or 68, around there, and I made up my mind that I'd never go on stage again, or nor would I ever take my shirt off again in public. And so, even though it was a smart thing to do at that particular time, psychologically, it was probably not a smart thing to do, because if that's the case, I'm not going to take my shirt off in front of everybody, and I don't look at my mirror in the mirror when I shave. Why bother? So it's psychologically, it was not a smart thing for me to do. But speaking off the stage with my shirt on was a smart thing to do.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, what are the things that you've noticed that, this question could sound kind of obvious, but I think it can be, elicit some good responses from you. What things do you notice different now than even, say, 10, 15 years ago in your training? Do you, like, positive or negatives?
Well, okay, I think with the aging processes, there's a combination of more negative than positive. Yeah. And I think injury comes into play, and I see everybody going out because of a shoulder injury, a knee injury, a back injury, and people who've trained for years are no longer training because of injuries and so on, and your recovery power just is not there. And what used to work for you no longer continues to work. I get phone calls from people all the time, Bill, what can I do for this, this, and this? And I said, well, when you find the answer for these questions, you please call them and tell me, because I do not have them.
Right. Are there things that you just don't do anymore, specific movements that you just don't do anymore?
Well, yes, I don't do 500-pound deadlifts. That's for sure.
You still deadlift?
I deadlift, but I do it as just another form of exercise, and I keep my repetitions to 10 or 12 repetitions. But if I'm handling 2 1/4 and so on, and it feels good, I'll just put the bar down and I'll wait for the following day. That's it.
Right, right. Is there anything that you wish you still could do that you don't? Not even necessarily poundage-wise, but is there anything that you...
Yes. Probably more leg work than I'm currently having some knee problems and so on, which limits my leg work. And I think if a person doesn't take the time to work their legs, they're virtually wasting half of the time in the gym. So, because it's the size of the muscle group and so on. And if you're doing heavy leg work, everything else you're doing is heavy as well. And if you back off on your legs, you're going to back off on the rest of your body.
Well, there's a lot of truth to that, and again, I can't talk from the scientific background like our Lonnie here can, but certainly Lonnie and I have discussed that. It seems that as people age, the first thing to go seems to be the legs, certainly as far as muscle mass and that type of thing, which is, and again, I know Lonnie can chirp it if he wants here because we have discussed this, but it does seem to be that way, and which also re-emphasizes exactly what you're saying, where lower body training, if you can do it, without damaging yourself, certainly is very, very important because obviously the more strength and the more muscle mass you have down there as you enter into your later years, certainly the better off you're going to be.
I agree wholeheartedly.
Yeah, I think we all agree on that one.
Right.
Even with the natural loss of muscle tissue, it's called sarcopenia of aging. But I think Bill hit on it. It's really injury prevention, right? I mean, if you can keep your knees working smooth and your lower back is feeling good and that kind of stuff, I got to think you're way ahead of the game. I mean, even what's in Eddie Cohn used to say the number one thing I try to do is avoid injuries. Yes. If there was one thing, it's avoid those injuries because they'll just shut you down. Yeah. And like Bill said, when you get older, here's me in my mid 40s, so I'm still comparatively young, but I'm already noticing a little bit on the recovery side. It's just not quite as fast as it once was. You can't get away with foolishness quite as much and that kind of stuff. So,
and sadly, what you're talking as you're growing older too, when this takes place that we're talking about, your activity during the rest of the day also diminishes as well. Mm-hmm. And so you find yourself sitting more than you used to, not taking on the projects that you probably should have done and wanted to do because of whatever it may be. You just become more lethargic, and I think it's a very, very dangerous thing to do.
Right. Yeah, it becomes sort of a vicious circle, doesn't it? You're a little less active, so then you lose a little bit of muscle mass, and then since you have less muscle mass, it's harder to be active, and you gotta fight that sort of.
Now, you've never really suffered a catastrophic injury, have you, Bill?
No, I've been very, very fortunate, but I've always tried to work around the injury, but never through an injury. Mm-hmm. I don't want to hit my head against the wall and keep banging my head against the wall. I think it's probably not a bad idea to back up a little teeny bit and try to go around the wall rather than through the wall.
Right.
But I had to learn that the hard way as well.
Now, what do you attribute that to? Again, for a guy who's been, pounding the iron for so many years, what do you attribute that to? Do you think that's largely that you're just, a hardy, sturdy individual from genetics, or do you think that has to do with, again, having that margin of maturity as far as exactly what you're saying, where when you notice an issue that might be coming up, you don't go through it, as you say, but you kind of work around it?
Well, I think what you're saying is true, but I also feel it's attitude. That if you make up your mind you're going to continue to do something, come hell or high water, I always have the idea that leave something in the gym today that you can do a little bit more the next day. I mean, I don't think it's a good idea for all of us to go into a health club every day and train to your maximum effort and give everything you have that day, because the following day you've got to do the same or more. It gets to the point where you just can no longer do more. So you've got to become a little more sensible, I think.
I think
attitude.
Right.
You've got to have a positive attitude as to what you're doing and make darn sure that you're not wasting your time, but you're spending some quality time on yourself.
I think what you're saying is actually being reworking its way into kind of the idea in a lot of weight training these days, because I think we went through in certainly the later 70s, 80s, and 90s this kind of attitude, certainly in bodybuilding, where it was kind of like, go for broke, give it all you got, walk out of the gym, be completely smashed. But then you had guys like Lee Haney that, used to say his quote was always stimulate, don't annihilate, which lends itself to what you're saying. And I think you're seeing that a lot more, certainly with the advent of more kind of scientific avenues of strength training entering into athletics, and people saying things like, don't go into the gym and, train yourself not to fail with certain lifts and repetitions and this type of thing. So, don't go 100%, all of us once in a while like to, as I say, get the let out and go in and just go nuts. I mean, every once in a while,
Sure.
guys like us like to do that. But I think more often than not, it's probably a good idea. Yeah, like if stop the set, 1 or 2 reps away from complete failure.
Well, sadly, in my particular case, because I've always played the sport at the high end of the sport. I mean, I look at it as climbing a ladder. Some people play it at the middle of the ladder, sometimes at the bottom of the ladder, sometimes at the top of the ladder. But when you've been at the top of the ladder for years and years and years, you have no place else to go. You can't go any further. And with the aging process and things involved, you've got no choice to come down that ladder, because when everything goes up, something has got to come down. And the human body is exactly the same. It hasn't changed.
Right. What do you think of all this stuff, Lonnie, from your scientific background of this type of thing, and I guess, nervous system replenishment, that kind of thing?
Well, the one thing that came to mind, and I'll just say this briefly, and then we'll take a little break for some public service messages, but there's a researcher named Andy Fry, and he purposely gets young men into overtraining status. And what they do is this seems brutal, but if you think about the way we work out, it's not that far-fetched. He has them do 10 max lifts, so 10 1-rep max lifts in the bench press every day for a week. 10 a day, every day. And by the end of that period, they are so burnt, their strength is way down. They can't activate their nervous system. You can see markers of damage in their blood, different enzymes spilling out of their muscles and whatnot. But so that seems absurd. Like, who could do 10 1-repetition maximums every day? But if you think about the way a lot of people lift, and especially the way the word hardcore sometimes gets twisted around, it's not that far-fetched. And it might not be exactly the same lift. It might not be all in the bench press or the squat, but I think some people do push that envelope by doing many sets to failure. You're doing 10 sets to failure, you're pushing that envelope.
But
probably.
What would be the benefit of him taking a student and doing that? What is the benefit for the student, may I ask?
Oh, well, I don't know if they paid those guys or what, but that was purely, research level stuff. They were actually defining that there's different kinds of overtraining. I think probably the coolest thing that came out of that was that those guys have what's called sympathetic overtraining. And basically he's saying that people who train with weights to the point that they overtrain, they end up with high background levels of adrenaline all the time. It's almost like their hormonal system can't cool down. And that's sort of the opposite of the kind of volume style overtraining that runners get, which is more like an exhaustion, and they lose adrenaline levels and they lose the ability to do a lot of this stuff. So it was kind of neat to see all that.
I would think the thing that would scare me on what you're talking here is the fact that you're going to run that person out of the gym. If they'd gone there and ended up with an unhappy failing 10 times in a row, or maximum 10 times in a row, and failing, and they do this over and over again, I don't think of anything at all why that guy would want to continue to go back to the gym and try to stay healthy.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, no, right. And that's right, Bill. I mean, this was, and again, I'm thinking about a particular study, and I don't have the quote here in front of me because Rob just pulled this on me, but, but these guys knew that they were an overtraining study. They knew that they were going to be extended beyond, their recovery ability. And I think most of these guys were hopefully they weren't novice lifters that, just become, I don't know.
I made a comment I might share with you just so long as we're talking about this thing. I make a comment, or I've made a comment several times. If you're in an exercise program, that's true, where you cannot continue an exercise program as you're doing today, every day, from now on out until the day you die. There's probably no sense of doing this because you're going to stop it. And if you're training twice a week or twice a day, or you're training 3 or 4 days a week or whatever it may be, or twice a day or whatever it may be, and you know that it's physically and psychologically not capable of doing it, why put yourself through it? Because it's going to run you out of there. Because if you can spend 3 or 4 or 5 hours of your time each week in the gym, that's for yourself, do something that you know you can physically and psychologically do until the day you die.
Yeah, maintainable.
Oh, there you go. That's the beautiful word right there, yes.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, I think one of the best things that came out of some of that overtraining research was that they sort of defined the envelope. You know, people like to push an envelope. Well, you got to know where the envelope begins and ends. And I think they're saying, listen, 10 maxes, that's crossing the line. You've torn the envelope. You know, so at least they kind of spell it out for you.
Well, I think you're right, Rob, that, I mean, it's becoming gladly, especially in the athletic realm. There's more and more people preaching just back off and backing off to get stronger.
Right.
I've seen it time and time again, people getting them back off, and once you finally do and don't get them pushing that envelope all the time, their strength goes up. And, you know, you get them on the platform, and they're actually doing better from doing less.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, Phil, you were talking about local experiences lately. Right along the same thing, I've been training twice a day, and I know it's not maintainable, Bill, but I'm trying to get ready for a competition. And you know, this is planned, sort of 20-week thing for me. But the point being is, I took 3 days off, and I almost slept the entire time. And you know, normal people don't do that, but I ate and slept for, you know, a couple of days in a row, and I came back, and I can't tell you, I mean, 405 in the squat felt like it was 2 1/4. And I'm like, you know, it was amazing to me how my nervous system just wanted to work with me instead of against me. So you can really feel this kind of stuff.
I think the comment I made is if you have a specific goal in mind and you have a date that you've got to do something, that's one thing. It's like cramming for a test in college or whatever it may be, or save for an automobile, whatever it may be. That's fine. But to trying to maintain what you're doing from here on out for no reason other than the fact that trying to maintain this, it's like you're going to burn yourself out and you will not continue on. Something's got to go, and it's usually your time in the gym.
Yeah, good advice.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, let's just take a brief break here just for a few announcements, and then we'll come right back and we'll do the topic of the day.
Fortress, what is best in life?
If you need a break from listening to these barbarians and you want to read something intellectual, check out the library at www.ironradio.org. The featured article this month is about a conference that took place in Canada, an exercise physiology conference where the researchers were literally trying to answer questions like the optimal number of sets and intensity for maximal protein synthesis and muscle growth. There's other juicy material there, like the effects of cortisol and adding more fat cells to your physique over time, how women recover better than men, and tons more. So if you're interested in reading as well as listening, check out www.ironradio.org and our article library. Thanks.
This is Rob Fortress Fortney, and I'm here to let listeners know about the upcoming Strength Workshop, co-hosted by Iron Radio in Las Vegas, Nevada, this coming June. Stay tuned for details. Simply listen to www.ironradio.org, also on iTunes, and check out the site as well. Hope to see you in Vegas, where some of the industry's smartest and strongest guys will be waiting to talk shop with you. Welcome back, Iron Radio listeners. We're here with the legendary Bill Pearl as our guest, and we're now at the topic of the day. And actually, Lonnie came up with this one, and I think it's actually quite clever. He was asking, because we have Bill on the show today, perceptions of bodybuilders, powerlifters, strongmen, because, I mean, to the general public. And, I mean, certainly Bill, you know, his peak competitive years was right through those years where, you know, guys who had, you know, an overabundance of muscle and so forth were probably looked upon as freaks out in general, you know, society, and what are you doing to yourself and this type of thing. And certainly that whole thing kind of continues to this day to an extent, so we can imagine how much it must have been back in Bill's, you know, day as a competitive lifter, bodybuilder. So, yeah, that's the topic of the day, just kind of, Bill, you know, what were your experiences as a young man doing this at the time, kind of freaky, weird, you know, athletic endeavor?
It was exactly what you said. I was just talking to some friends that I trained with the other day in the gym. I guess it was 2 or 3 days ago, and I mentioned I'd given an exhibition in a small town in Oregon back in the 1960s and so on, and I was at a local theater, and when my bodybuilding exhibition was over and my strength feats and stuff were over, I was out in the lobby standing there, and a little girl came up and started poking at me, and she looked up at her mother and she says, "Can this talk?" So it's just a comment that, it was even then it was to the point where a little kid thought you were no longer a human, that you were something weird from another country or another planet and so on, and they could not comprehend what was taking place. And I think it's probably worse today than it was then. And that was 35 or 40 years ago.
Hey, now that's interesting. That's interesting. Now, did you try to downplay your physique in public consciously, or not really? You just went about your business and began what people thought?
I've always looked at my bodybuilding career, my competitive bodybuilding career, as a job or a business. And I always let someone else, such as you nice people, talk about me rather than me talking about me. And and you're going to expound a great deal more on me than I'm going to expound on me. And so if I just have enough brains to keep my mouth shut and just listen and have you guys help me out, I'm going to come out ahead, period. And I think that's very, very important. I really, truly do.
Well, I certainly think that, your generation of bodybuilder, the community was very fortunate to have a guy like you as a spokesperson, because I think, back then, certainly, I mean, today it's, the myth of the kind of the dumb meatball muscle builder. That thing still persists, as you say. So certainly with guys like Lonnie and so forth, I mean, he's a competitive bodybuilder and so forth, but he's, so educated and so forth. I've always said that, not to kiss his butt or anything, but, guys like that are so important within the realm of what we do, because, the first impression for a lot of people who don't engage in what we do is, the dumb meatball bodybuilder that, and then once, guys like us open our mouths, they see that, we're not raging idiots, and, we are educated, and we have, have a brain. Because, I'm one of the mantras of us here at IronRadio, I think, is, strong body, strong mind. Those two things together are a killer combination. And I think back in your day, certainly when you would open your mouth and present yourself as such a well-spoken person, I think that you really, really went a long way to helping a lot of people who were not exposed to that understand that, there is something behind the madness of lifting all these weights.
Yes, there is. I think it's becoming, sadly, again, in some respects, back to almost a cult type of a thing as it was back in the 40s and 50s and so on. I think that the sport of bodybuilding and all of these lifts, competitions you're talking about, is probably not on the rise. I think that fitness is on the rise because of the health aspects, but because the way that the sport has been presented with the amount of drugs and stuff involved in it, and to the point where people just no longer can comprehend it. I truly think it's sad.
Yeah,
right.
I agree.
Right.
Yeah. If I can follow up, Rob, you were talking about sort of one of the critiques I think that society has of muscle men, or even women who weight train, is, well, if you have a fantastic body, you must not have a fantastic brain. And I just wanted to read you a quick quote. One of our co-hosts here, John Mike, sent me this article from the Chronicle of Higher Education, which is sort of the official magazine of, academia in a way. And it's called Bodybuilding Professors Outmuscle the Stereotype. And they highlight this one woman, Melina Bell, who is a female bodybuilder. She's also a philosophy professor. But I just wanted to read one of the quotes. There's maybe half a dozen quotes after the article of, these different learned people making comments. And some of this I don't totally disagree with, but some of this will probably, raise your ire a little bit, all of you guys. It says, she's talking about the balance, mind-body balance, and he says, ironic that Miss Bell would justify what she does with this bodybuilding as balanced. There isn't anything balanced about what she's done to her body, judging from her picture. She looks barely human in that pose or costume. And yes, I would say the same about extreme male bodybuilders. And if it's so inherently healthy, why the need for the artificial makeup, euphemistically referred to in the article as self-tanning lotion? There's a world of difference between lifting weights and such to promote general health and strength for functional reasons, like for your job, and deliberately sculpting individual muscles to produce an aesthetic effect. It reminds me of the bizarre things done in dog breeding, like smashed-in pug noses and the like. to produce what a very narrow cultural sect finds aesthetically desirable. So,
that's very interesting, and in some respects, I think she's probably that's a very good article. I hate to tell you this, but I think it's very true. In some respects.
there's some truths in there, and at the same time, you can kind of see the perception that this particular professor, whoever it is, has of bodybuilders. How bizarre it is that he thinks, individual muscle sculpting. If you're not doing it for your job, why would you do that? It's like dog breed, that kind of stuff.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I think another thing that should be in consideration here is your self-image. I mean, some people just aren't 100% satisfied with themselves, and everybody's craving attention. We see it in our ads today. We see it on television, whatever it may be, and the sexual connotation that everything is taking place today. And I think, with all true sincerity, that in the United States and throughout the world, there's a moral decline. And when the moral decline comes about and continues on, such as it has, you're going to have more bizarre people out there doing bizarre things for attention and only attention, period. And I think a lot of people who are bodybuilders and so on love to get on stage and pose just hour after hour after hour. They have some problems. I mean, psychological problems. They're looking for attention. And this is one way of getting this, but that particular type of attention.
Right. Well, Bill, if I can ask you, how does that differ from what you and your sort of peers did?
It doesn't. It hasn't differed. I'm not trying to put myself in a different category than these guys.
Oh, okay.
I'm not doing that, period. And I think that I've seen it time and time again. Some people could just control it a little bit better than others. But it's been there since all the time I've been in the industry. I've been weight training steadily for the last 69 years, and I can tell you it hasn't changed.
Yeah.
Well, I would say, I think I'd kind of agree with you. I think society as a whole, it's gotten worse, though. And I've spoken about this lately. I mean, now, maybe this decade, and definitely today, is the first time in the world, in the history of the world probably, that, you are, number one, your value is on your appearance.
Okay.
Through most of the people. I mean, most of the rich people in the world, the people making it, are simply good looking above anything else, and championed for that.
Plastic surgery.
You look at the Hilton, Paris Hilton, and all that. I mean, they have nothing to offer but a pretty smile.
Okay.
They have millions and millions of dollars, and they're championed.
Yes.
Nothing to offer. It's hard.
Yeah, that's true.
Well, but I think that this kind of, takes us full circle to kind of what Bill and I were kind of trading off with, 45 minutes ago, but the whole concept of, recognizing within oneself, what is your motivation for this? And coming to kind of a purity of thought of, am I doing this for reasons that are going to be, that's going to nourish me, emotionally, intellectually, and physically in a way that's going to be, maybe positively affect the people around me, to say nothing again of yourself and what it does for you, versus people again who are just chasing attention through any means, necessary, like you say, whether it be plastic surgery or like Bill says, just, doing the weight training as a means to an end to go on stage and kind of just, look at me kind of a thing. Look at Bill. I mean, Bill's, many decades now past when he stood on stage as a competitor, but he still goes out and does his weight training. And I think that speaks volumes for,
it does.
I mean, the fact that, here's a guy that, was in it for all the quote unquote right reasons, right? And he realized the purity of why he liked doing what he was doing. And it wasn't just to get attention. And I think there's that scale, certainly in bodybuilding, since that's what we're talking about specifically right now, probably. There's that, scale that's kind of, you have on the one side, you have the bodybuilders who are solely in it for the, aesthetic and for, again, to look at me, I want to go on the cover, I want all this kind of stuff. And then there's guys on the other end of the scale who are like, hey, you know what, I go on stage because I like to just, it's kind of like a moment in time for me to kind of say, hey, look what I've been spending my time doing. But it's not the be all, end all. And I think that's always going to be, I mean, if you go and, again, I've been in the bodybuilding game for so long and interviewed so many professional bodybuilders and so forth, and I can say that there's always going to be that margin of people that are on both sides of the scale. You know, the people who are in it for and again, this is kind of taking the high road and makes me sound kind of arrogant, but the people who are in it for the quote unquote right reasons, and the people that you just kind of know after you get to know them a little bit, somewhere down the line, something's going to go awry because it's like, as Bill says, they can't maintain this, and they're in it kind of for the wrong reasons, and it's not nourishing them as people, intellectually or emotionally, and they're going to crash and burn at some point because they...
I like the word nourishing, Rob. Hey, didn't you say that, was it Flex Wheeler, or there was some pro from the last 10-year period who he would boast that as soon as I can't make money at this or I'm not competing, I'm never going to touch another weight or something.
No, that was actually Flex Wheeler, and as it stands, he does train once in a while, but I mean, you
look at the health problems that he has gone through,
yes,
from how much money he's made and what he's going to make, and the rest of the quality of his life from here on out. If you judge all this together, I got a feeling that maybe Flex Wheeler didn't come out ahead, you guys.
No, I agree.
And I don't like to make any comment on him as a person. I mean, I got my own issues.
No, he's a very nice guy.
Yeah, like I don't want to comment on that too much, but certainly yes, as a bodybuilder. I mean, in fact, I read a thread not too long ago on a muscle a bodybuilding board that was talking about, look at the year 2011, how many of these young enthusiasts that are picking up Flex magazine even really kind of know about Flex Wheeler? I mean, and
they don't.
Yeah, and it's not. I mean, that's horrible because at his prime, he was truly a specimen.
But I make a comment. The only thing that Flex Wheeler had to offer was his physique. If the guy had written some books or he'd worked with a bunch of youths or so on, doing what you people are doing to expand his knowledge and help other people out, he could live his life through these other people if he so desired. I hope I can make sense, but I don't doubt that there isn't a day all three of you get a phone call from somebody you've worked with down the line is thanking you for the time and effort you spent with them. And that's the biggest reward that I can be paid, and probably one of the biggest rewards that you people can be paid.
Yeah,
it's
a lot of that, I mean, just to go to this show directly, it's the only reason we do this.
Well, there again, I mean, but I can tell you with all due sincerity, as you're going along the line, I will tell you there isn't probably a day go by that you're not going to get an email from somebody thanking you for what you're doing, and that is the payday right there, in my opinion.
Exactly.
Well, if I can if I can flip that back around, one of the things that we do is, bring the attention of young guys to people like you, Bill.
Okay.
I mean, people who I really think it's exactly your kind of message that a lot of these young guys need, or even middle-aged guys, people that are our age is, we do need heroes. We need people that are honorable and respectable that we can look up to, not somebody who's just offering a physique, like you said. So,
well, one of the things I remember when I first started at Muscle Mag, and I've told the story before, I mean, I was so excited. I was young. I was 24, 23, whatever it was. And I was so excited. I remember any time somebody would call on the phone, a professional or so forth, and I, just like a young guy, green, didn't really know anything. I was so excited. I remember Bob telling me, just wait, wait a year or two dealing with a lot of these guys, and it's gonna, open your eyes. And it's one of those things where sometimes it is dangerous to meet your heroes, and so many of the guys that I was so enamored with back in the day, and again, I'm not going to name names at all, but, I'm just not at all anymore. And, that's why, again, like Lonnie's saying with you, Bill, I mean, it's, there's that small contingent of guys that when you're in the industry like we are, you weed them out. You're like, okay, here's a guy that genuinely we can look up to,
right, lives up to the image, right, that you had in your mind.
He's not just the body, he's not just the title, he's not just the cover. He's actually, like to use your word, Lonnie, he's an honorable guy. He's well spoken, and and he lives his life with character and integrity. But it's sad because there's so few people, and that's why we can't let people forget, where we've been and the good people that have brought us to where we are.
Yes.
And like as far as Bill's saying, it's maybe on the decline or it's going back underground and so forth. I think that's true to a large degree, but I think it's up to, again, guys like us to champion the fact that, hey, you know what? In this maybe dark and dirty business that it's become, there is shining lights out there of people that do it for the, again, quote unquote, right reasons.
Sure.
And they do it for the love of it. Like you're in the gym and I was just helping some kid in the gym last night, and I was saying, I had talked to him the last several times, and I actually said to him, have I helped you to become a better lifter? And he's like, oh yeah, absolutely. And I said, people helped me when I was his age.
Okay.
And this is by no means suggesting that I know everything. I learn new things every day. But, I think it's one of those things where you have to pass it along, and good information needs to be passed along, and sometimes good information in this day and age of information overload is sometimes hard to come by. So
It's hard to find.
Right.
Yeah,
Well,
it's probably
common sense
there, but it's so hard to
information,
find.
I think we're looking for is just common sense information. It doesn't have to be anything philosophical, but it should be common sense that people can understand. And I also think that it's very important for us, if we're going to talk as we have today, to be that type of a role model. And I've said 1,000 times, if I can walk down the street and I see 3 or 4 people coming toward me, I can make eye contact and I smile, and these 3 people smile back. Who won?
Right.
I smiled one time. I got 3 smiles back. I won. But you control people. You can control people or make yourself more happy by just smiling and telling people hello, and don't just take the time to open a door for somebody and look at the shock on their face. They about flip. They don't understand it anymore, and it's really truly sad. I've come to the conclusion that the world is becoming extremely lonely for a whole lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Seems ironic, but yeah.
It is. I mean, the first time I ever met you, Bill, I remember, you practice what you preach. I'm just telling our readers right that, and this is one of the reasons why you've been elevated in my mind so much. I mean, you are genuinely are a person who's approachable, you're warm, you're friendly with everybody, and you treat everybody with respect. And this is the kind of thing that, for our young listeners out there, if you have your sights set on becoming a public figure in some manner, whether it be powerlifting, bodybuilding, whatever, or you just want to get into the media of fitness and so forth, it really, really does. I think you have to take the onus on yourself to present yourself as a person with integrity and honor, and it's the only way we're going to, again, shine a brighter light on what it is that we do. So
right. Back to the topic we were saying, which is, how people perceive us. Imagine if you are a heavily muscled person and, you do stand out because of that, but you are getting that door for someone, or you are smiling as you walk down the street instead of trying to be some kind of tough guy. All it does is enhance the whole image. I mean, it, like you said, it shines the light, especially if we see bodybuilders becoming more of a cult thing and with it getting divorced a little bit from general fitness. Boy, we need some good examples out there so people don't either look at you in a sense of either fear or that you're cocky or arrogant or something like that, because not everybody who's heavily muscled is like that.
No, I mean, another little comment, if a person can be a part of successful, everybody wants to be a part of success, regardless of what the success is. And so if you've lived your life and been relatively successful and you can be kind to other people, they're going to share that success with you, but they're going to just continue to shine a bigger light on you. We win every time in a situation such as that. I really truly mean that with all sincerity.
I wanted to share one thing. I know we don't have a ton of time left, and maybe Rob and Phil want to share a story too, but the one thing that I remember was not unlike your story, Bill, where when I was in grad school, we were doing a osteoporosis study. We were trying to help these very old women. They were 75 to 95 years of age. And at the time, I was bulking up. I've never been huge, right? But I was about 220 pounds. And I remember one of the little old ladies says to my professor advisor, she says, "What's wrong with that young man?" And I could overhear her saying it. And she said, what do you mean? She said, "Well, he's bumpy." And to this day, my wife laughs about that I'm bumpy. But, at the same time, what are we doing there? Here's me and one or two other grad school buddies of mine. We're kind of bodybuilder guys, and we're in the weight room doing pull downs with 80-year-old women, and they were having a blast. And honestly, they got very, very strong, kind of amazingly strong. In fact, it's amazing to see an 85-year-old woman doing push-ups that not on her knees, push-ups. But anyway, that was my one story that I was thinking about, was that, you can be a little bit maybe even odd looking or stand out in some way, but it doesn't have to mean that it's a negative thing.
No. I mean, with me, it was in my heart. It was nothing but an aid when I would do one of my shows or sit at the gallery I was a co-owner in. It actually helped me because it helped me stand out in the art field. and it helped me stand out when I was going in and getting my master's degree in teaching. And because they were just amazed, they'd come and view my art, and then they'd walk up to me and say, "Who did this?" And well, it's me. No way. And I'd get it on both ends then, that I'd go do a strongman competition or a powerlifting meet and tell people that, check out my website. I'm a master's degree in art. And then they were amazed. So I got amazement on both ends. So it was kind of good, a good thing.
Right. Well, I think this has been a wonderful show, and certainly we're, again, honored to have had Bill on the show with us. What is your website again, Bill, so people can go and check it out? It's
www.com Bill Pearl. It's small b, small p. It's very simple. And it's a very small business. My wife and I, we run the place ourselves, and when we get tired, we just close shop and go home. So we're in pretty good shape. We're all right.
Nice.
Well, you got 3 customers here. I'm getting your book.
Guys.
No, I'm totally going to go and order that book. Yeah. But people, check them out. And again, keep the these champions and legends of yesteryear alive in the minds of the young folks, and teach them to do things with the right motivations, and to, as Bill says, smile.
There you go. I got one more for you.
Okay.
I will just urge everybody to go to www.strengthguild.com, and Bill Pearl is going to be nice enough to do a Q&A. So if you go ask questions, then I will be calling Bill, and we will be going over your questions. So
I'm looking forward to that.
That's awesome.
That's great. Okay.
Yeah,
Bill.
we need to spread the word. What could be more necessary, right?
Go.
All right.
Well, thank you very much for the interview. I've really, truly enjoyed this. And like I say, I'll walk out the door because of you 3 people smiling. And that's the biggest reward I get for the day, and it doesn't cost a dime. So
thank you, sir.
All right.
Thank you.
You guys all have a great day, and thank you for your time.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
For the best sports nutrition information on the planet, make plans to attend the 8th Annual ISSN Conference and Expo, June 23rd to 25th, 2011 at the Westin Las Vegas Hotel, Casino, and Spa. We'll have the latest on creatine, beta-alanine, protein, nutrient timing, and much, much more. So for more information, go to www.theissn.org.
Iron Radio is accepting donations. If you like Iron Radio, if you like what we do, the education, interviewing industry personalities, or many of the pro bodybuilders or coaches that we've had in the past, please just click on the donate button at www.ironradio.org and make a donation. We've had some great donations from people that have kept us going. Thank you so much. So please visit the website, click on the donation button, or if you like, and it's a similar situation, buy some Iron Radio cool stuff. We've got t-shirts and mugs and things like that, and those things help support the site and keep us on the air. The Iron Radio podcast and all of the audio on ironradio.org is for informational purposes only. If you're interested in starting a diet or exercise program, it's important to check with your physician. Also seek the help of registered dietitians, athletic trainers, and qualified exercise physiologists in order to make the progress that you need.